I'm Gerri McCritty from Pava Gallery, here on Shining a Light at LCTV, Channel 66, downtown Lancaster. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with two very important people in this community that I believe. I have Miss Ondra and Reverend Bailey. And I'm going to start off with you, Ondra. Introduce yourself to our viewers and let them know a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, my name is Ondra Haywood. I'm the director of Living the Experience. It's a spiritual interactive reenactment of the Underground Railroad housed at Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Lancaster.
All right. And over here we have Reverend Bailey.
Yeah, and I pastor Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church, which is the oldest African church that's in Lancaster County. Started in 1817, and one of the things with the living experience is telling the story from the African perspective and the Christian perspective, because most people who tell the story tell it as a history, but not as church history. And so what we try to do is give that part of the story that's untold.
Okay. So this part of the story is not a part of the church history.
No, it's part of the church history, but it's not a part of history that you normally hear in America.
Okay.
So when you go to schools, you don't hear the story from the black perspective.
Yeah.
Every time you hear of it, the heroes are white.
Right.
And nobody talks about the many, many black folk who worked and fought for their own freedom.
Right.
And that's what we try to do with the living experience. Nobody helped us, and those who did help us, we had to do most of it by ourselves.
Right.
And that's not told.
Right. So how long has this been going on? How long has this Underground Railroad performance been going on?
25 years.
25 years. And it's held at Mother Bethel?
No, at Bethel, African Methodist Episcopal Church on North and Strawberry Street.
Okay.
It's been in the same place ever since its existence.
Okay. Wow, wonderful. And Andrea, what entails this? You're a part of this production.
Correct.
What does it entail?
So, you were saying being a part of it. I actually started actually when I was 14.
Okay.
What happens is basically anyone, no matter what color, race, you get to step into the feet of an African who is seeking their freedom.
Yeah.
So we kind of give you some background, some education about what would happen if you came into Lancaster City at that time, and what could happen in a normal worship service at that time.
Okay.
It's definitely enlightening, and I feel like everyone should definitely see it.
And Rev, whose concept was this?
Well, there was a couple of people. Sister Fumi was one of the persons who was here with us, and she has since been deceased.
Yeah.
But the main thing came, saw a bunch of African Americans coming to Lancaster County.
Okay.
And I could not realize why they were all outside the city, and that there was no interest in the city to have those folk come into the city and bring that money that the tourists were bringing from other places. And so that's basically what happened. And so we at the church decided that we needed to do something that would bring some of those folk into the city. And we realized that the thing we had was our story. And so that's where it basically began, to try to figure out how do you get those people who were putting on, and I even took the idea to the city. At that time, they were resistant to it because they didn't want buses to come into the. Actually, the buses of African Americans coming into the city.
Okay.
That's not what they said, but that's where most of the people who were coming on the buses, going out to Sight and Sound, filling out Sight and Sound, filling out the. I want to tell the truth about it is that on Saturdays. I thought I was in Harlem when I saw so many other black folk who were here in Lancaster County on Saturdays. So I just didn't believe it, that all those people were coming. And the other thing I realized, this was what my mother used to call going to Amish country. They used to take buses and bring them here, and I never knew this was it.
Wow.
So that was where it started. But Leroy Hopkins and so many other people who were trying to get this story out are really responsible for it.
Right. So would you say this city was pretty much segregated at that time?
In the 1800s?
I mean,
Or
you
now?
know,
Or
no, but basically when you were trying to bring in this event, the Underground Railroad, I mean, because you were saying there was some resistance.
Lancaster has been considered one of the last cities to do anything about racism.
Okay.
So, and that's not, that's the way it is. I mean, people don't want to talk about it, but that's the way it is, yes.
But then, okay, come back today. How would you think it is today?
Well, I want to stay on our story about the Underground Railroad.
Which leads to the Underground Railroad.
Okay, because it hasn't really changed.
Okay.
All right, so you just look and see where the people of color live in the city and what's happening with downtown.
Okay.
And so that's what gets me in trouble, because people don't want to hear that kind of prophetic message that you just can't live in a city where you're building these high rises downtown and you can't find places for people in other parts of the city building those single family homes.
So what impact do you feel that the Underground Railroad will bring into this city?
It's an economic thing. And Ondra would tell you, so that's why she would talk about the vendors and things. We want to give people an opportunity that they really can't get to exercise the economic availability.
Okay, which moves us on to you, Andrea.
That's definitely for sure. We try to reach out to local vendors that may not get those opportunities that are given to some of the folks that are downtown, or may not have access to some of the folks that are downtown to get their stuff seen and bought. So that's one thing we definitely focus on. As well, I think it's very beneficial because it just helps anyone open their eyes and see a different lens to see some of the struggles that Africans went through and are still going through. So I think that's very important.
So 25 years into this and still opening it to African Americans and vendors, how successful has that been comparing it to today with participation from the African American vendors that you want to participate in this event?
Well, like I was telling you earlier, during the pandemic, it kind of died down, and we just started revamping. We had a 25th commemoration in December, and it was an awesome turnout. We sold out of the show, and we were actually able to give some history, and we had a presentation honoring some of those who've helped with the show for the last 25 years, which was really awesome.
Nice.
Some of the history we gave regarding the Africans that were around here that were free and enslaved, a lot of local heroes that people do not speak of. When they think of Black history, they think of Harriet Tubman, they think of Sojourner Truth, but a lot of people don't know about Reverend Stephen Smith that lived right in Columbia, that was a millionaire of his time, that helped get Africans across the river to Lancaster and to other free areas. So it just gives them a little bit more education about the rich history that's right here in Lancaster. Lydia Hamilton Smith, we were the first folks to actually start speaking about Lydia Hamilton Smith back in actually 98.
Wow.
And Thaddeus Stevens and things like that. Now it's, become more popular recently, but that story still needs to be told.
So when people come to this performance, they're going to get history. They're going to be enlightened.
Absolutely.
And learn about where they come from. Okay.
It's more than that, too. It's an experience.
It is.
Okay.
So that's why it's called living the experience, because when you come, you're drawn back into that time and that thinking and trying to figure out what those persons were going through. So it's more than just a show. It's not a show. It's an experience for folk, and people weep and go through all kinds of things. And when the slave catchers run in, the people want to fight them, and people actually have got ready to knock folk over because they thought they were so caught up in the moment.
Okay. yeah.
So it's an experience. We haven't had no violence, but people were ready. You know, they thought
How
they
many
were really
people?
ready.
How many people are in this event? How many people participate? How many actors do you have?
Well, they're not actors; they're reenactors.
Oh,
So
reenactors,
We will
okay.
take people who come
Okay.
to the reenactment
Okay.
and put them as part of the reenactment,
Okay.
because we want people to feel the story, tell the story. And so often in class, you know, you were told what the story was, but nobody ever let you actually act out the story for
yeah,
yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's much different. And so that's why we call it a reenactment.
Reenactment.
So.
Okay.
And what Ondra was saying, Liddy Hamilton Smith and Thaddeus Stevens, nobody was talking about them.
Right. Right.
Nobody. They weren't doing a museum. They weren't doing none of that stuff until we did this reenactment and people saw the buses coming. And so what people do always economically, and they can do it because they have the money. We don't. They have the money. They can steal the idea and build on it. And they'll build a museum and everything. All this could have been done, the museum downtown for Thaddeus Stevens could have been done years ago. Why are they doing it now when Bethel put this thing on? So if everybody was interested in Thaddeus Stevens, they should have done something before I got here, and before we did this reenactment. So if he was such a hero, and now, you know, he's a hero because there's money, you know? And we wanted to use that money to. The thing was never for Bethel to be greater. We wanted to use that money to build the economic in that part of the city.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
You know, so
Yeah.
the vendors could start. We wanted to do small stores and those things. It was a big vision, and it's my failure because I didn't get it done, so it's nobody else's fault. But the vision was bigger than just a reenactment.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
But it's still the vision, you know.
Still the vision.
Still the vision.
Still the vision. So what's the fee, and can you get a little bit more into what are people gonna, when people pay their money to come in, what are they gonna be getting?
So our reenactment, the living experience includes the actual reenactment.
Okay.
You get to also experience a Southern style buffet meal, as well as access to our local vendors that will be on site, as well as actually a tour of our graveyard, who actually holds over 350 war vets.
Oh, wow.
And it's a very small plot, but you know, at that time they just, you know,
Yeah.
but it's 350 Africans that are buried on our land that fought for this country.
Yeah.
And that's what, and not all of them were soldiers, but the only place they could be buried at that
Yeah.
time was in this graveyard, even though there's a much larger graveyard on the
Yeah.
other side.
Literally right up on the other side of our building.
They could not be
they
buried.
weren't
So the
able
only
to.
place they could be buried was in the graveyard of the church. And that's a story that we want to be
Okay,
able to tell
okay.
people. You know.
So the underground, I'm trying to understand the Underground Railroad, the whole living the experience, the reenactment. Say I were to buy tickets and come in, and would I be stepping into that world? You know, like, would it make me feel like I'm back then?
Absolutely. I didn't get a chance to tell you the tickets are $38.50.
Okay.
But it includes all of the things that I mentioned beforehand.
Yeah.
And you definitely step into that. We've had tourists come from all over, literally California, Canada, Africa,
Wow.
to this show in
Yeah.
the past 25 years,
Europe.
and a lot of Europe.
Wow.
And we've had them sometimes come and like book a whole tour for the weekend of Lancaster County, and some of them have come from Sight and Sound, said we did not feel what we felt
Wow.
at Living the Experience. This
Yeah.
show, well, production actually, it just resonates something in you. You will laugh, you will cry. We've seen it all. You really do step into the shoes of an African at that time period.
And how long is it? How long?
So
is
the
it?
whole process, from the introduction in our culture center, which is a historical site, as well as our church, which is a historical site, the reenactment, the meal, and then we kind of recap about what you learned throughout the reenactment. About 2 hours, 2.5 maybe.
Okay.
And
all of
sometimes
this.
a little bit longer because the people
Yeah.
make it longer.
Okay.
So we
They
don't
really feel the
intend-
story.
They get into it
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
that.
they get into it. And so,
Nice.
and sometimes go. But you said something earlier. This is why we do it, because you said I want to understand. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Especially people have not heard this story.
Yeah.
What people have heard, quite naturally, that black folk were happy being slaves. That
Which
we
is
were married.
crazy.
Just laughing, and they don't understand that the songs that the African used at that time wasn't to express their happiness. It generally was telling a story about how they were going to seek their freedom.
A message.
And so, seeking their freedom in plain sight, and most people don't know that. They were not happy. There was no happy slaves. I mean, it's an oxymoron. To say somebody's enslaved, that they're happy.
Right.
And so people fought for their freedom. And every freedom that Americans have today has basically been because of that push. We talk about the revolution. That's nice. But it's actually the movement of black people working for their freedom, moving for their freedom, that has given more Americans freedom than they ever would have had. Go back and check the Constitution. And you'll see what the Constitution was giving people as freedoms. And you'll see that black folk have been fighting ever since we've been here. And every freedom that white folk, when everybody else sits around talking about they're so great about, they wouldn't have. Women wouldn't be voting. If it wasn't for people, black folk pushed for the vote. Black men wouldn't be voting. Most men wouldn't be voting in America because you had to have own property in order to vote. So it wasn't for the push for black folk have done many of the freedoms that white people and everybody in America have, they would not have. That's why we do this story. Because it's not only the freedom that for us, it's also the freedom for all Americans, because most Americans don't understand the freedoms that they have and don't understand why they need those freedoms. That's why they're so willing to give them back, because they didn't earn them. If you earn it, you know that you don't want to give up the right to vote because you earned it. You fought for it. And when you didn't fight for it, you don't think as much, nobody should have a vote. So it's more about what you just asked. We want people to understand, what is freedom in America?
Yeah.
Because most people don't know what freedom is.
Yeah.
And they don't know how to fight for freedom. They think soldiers fought for freedom. No. Most of the wars that we've had in America was one war, the Civil War. So what soldiers are fighting for American freedom, you can't fight for our freedom over in Europe. And so what are you fighting for? The marches that we had, the things that we've done in America, that's what gave us our freedoms, and most people don't realize it. So don't let me talk too much about that.
Well, you've enlightened me, for sure, and all I want to continue to do is to understand, and I think that goes for a lot of us out there, viewers. We need to understand. We need to learn more. We need to learn more about our freedom and what it takes to get that freedom. The struggle continues. And on that note, I would like to say thank you. Rev, thank you very much.
Well, I'd like to say one more thing before you do.
Yes.
So many people around the world are excited about the freedoms that Americans have had.
True.
And that's what gave them the drive in many countries to push away dictators and everything else. And America wants to go back.
I could ask you the question, why you think that is, but that's a whole other. We're going to leave that alone right there. But Rev, before we go
because they don't know their freedom. They don't know their story.
Yeah.
If you don't know your history,
know your history,
then you don't understand what the whole experiment of America is about.
Right.
And so as an African American, I don't have to be mad at nobody.
Right.
Because I know my history. And I know what the American experiment, it's an experiment.
Right.
There's no other nation that has done what we've done. And people don't understand that. And when you don't understand that, you want to go back to this craziness that doesn't work.
So can you give our viewers one word of advice coming from Reverend Bailey?
Yeah.
Inspirational advice.
To just don't go by what you hear on Fox and ABC for your news. Pick up a book. The history has been written.
Yeah.
You know, so if you don't go to a library, you can get the books and find out what has America been about. And I would say to people, be inquisitive, have curiosity.
I like that. Yes. And you?
Repeat your
Word of
question.
advice, word of inspiration for our viewers?
Word of advice. Definitely to educate yourself. Like Rev was
I like
saying.
that.
I've learned so much just doing living the experience
Yes.
about different folks in this community that I would have never known had I not been a part of this. And that's why we tell this story, is to let others know, like, this city has been through so much, and a lot of us come from so many great people. And they need to know where they come from so they can know where they're going. And that they can also be encouraged if they can do that, done so much with so little. Imagine what we can do now.
Yeah.
So educate yourself.
Educate yourself. Thank you.